In this math tag video, we want to talk about least common denominator. Because if you're going to do math, you need to be working with the same stuff. And if you're doing math with fractions, the fraction part that you're working with is the denominator. The denominator is not the same. You're not working with the same stuff, which means you are not doing math. If you don't make those denominators match, you're not subtracting the correct numbers. You're just subtracting the random numbers that happen to be there, which is a math tag unmath. It doesn't work unless you're working with the same thing. If you look at the math they have here, your answer to your subtraction problem is bigger than the two numbers that you're subtracting. And kind of because of math, you can't end up with a bigger fraction when you're subtracting two things that are smaller than one in the first place. Here, math tag, unreduce. If you're looking at 2/5 minus 1/3, what you need to do is find the least common denominator, which is the smallest number that uses these two denominators as factors, which in this case is 15. 5 and 3 are both factors in 15 because if you multiply 5 times 3, you get 15. So what we do over here is we take 3 over 3 for our, mirrored again, 2/5. If we could change this denominator to 15 and then change the top by the same number, it's what's called an equivalent fraction. Equivalent fractions aren't the exact same, but they mean the same thing. They're cut into the different numbers of pieces, but they take up the same amount of area. So 2/5 is equivalent to 6/15. We can do this because this 3 over 3 is 1, and 1 times anything is itself. So we change the way it looks, we change the way it works, but it still means the same thing because if you diagram it, it takes up the same amount of space on the diagram. So down here we've got 1/3, our denominator is 3, which means we need to use our 5 over 5 as 1 so that we can change this denominator to 15. And we take our 1 on the top and multiply it times 5, so we change the top and bottom by the same number because multiplication, which is just making another equivalent fraction. Same thing, change made to the top as the bottom. It takes up the same amount of space on the diagram, though it's not exactly the same. It's just a different number of pieces. We've got 5 over 15. Now if we can reduce that, 5 divided by 5 is 1. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Takes us right back to 1/3. So we're basically math tag unreducing. We're making the denominators bigger so we can actually do the math correctly. When we do that, we get 1/15. 6/15 minus 5/15 equals 1/15. Now, first thing we always do to check, always reduce if you can. Second thing we're going to tell you about this problem, you can't. Unreduce because you need the same denominator. But when you're done, you always have to reduce it because we want the math to be as simple as possible. That's why we look for the least common denominator, the smallest number we can use to make that math work. That way we've got less reducing to do later. This is the math tag. Don't play with the denominator. This math problem only works if you change that denominator the right way. And we did the math. We changed the denominator the right way. We got the least common denominator. We multiplied the top times the bottom. When we get the right denominator, don't subtract it. Don't add it. All we're working with a denominator is the correct number of pieces. Once we've got that fraction broken into the correct number of pieces, it's the numerators. When we diagram, we are diagramming what numerator we have. Just cut in the circle or square or rectangle, whatever, into the correct number of pieces according to the denominator. So when we get the right denominator, don't play with the denominator. Leave it alone until you have to get to the end of the fraction and reduce. But when you're doing math, you are always wanting to do math with the denominators matching if it's possible.